Sharon Moore and the Michigan Wolverines have a big year in front of them, a year in which they are looking to improve in multiple areas, and they return a good group of talent that has their sights set on the college football playoff. We're taking a deep dive into the Michigan Wolverines to see what we should expect from this team and how they get better in 2025. Last year, obviously, was a fairly successful season for Michigan. You finish 8-5. It didn't have the same feeling, though, as some of the other 8-win seasons that they've had in the past. The offense struggled mightily, mostly because the quarterback position was one of the worst in college football that maybe we've ever seen. And the nice thing for Michigan fans is that they obviously saw Sharon Moore and his staff go out and address that right off the bat. Chip Lindsey is going to be the offensive coordinator. Wink Martindale is back after an interesting season. You had to kind of a transition season, if you will, to Wink Martindale. And I think there were plenty of successful things. And with the core group that he is coming back, I think they feel like they're in good hands with that core group. And heading into 2025, you feel like you need to take a step in terms of your production, in terms of your level of play. And we'll talk about the schedule and how that happens, but we'll obviously break down the depth chart to see where that needs to occur. And some of that had to do with transfer portal talent, because at Michigan, you're producing multiple NFL draft picks. And we saw that again last year. You saw Colston Loveland is off to the NFL, one of the best tight ends that we saw in college football last year. You also saw your two running backs, Khalil Mullings and Donovan Edwards, depart. Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, the best duo at defensive tackle in college football, are gone. Josiah Stewart's gone. Makari Page, Miles Hinsett. You lose a ton of talent to the NFL, but that's where you want to be if you're Michigan. You want those players going to the NFL because it means you've done a good job of developing them and putting them in positions to be successful. You do lose a couple of transfers, but overall, I think Michigan feels like they're in a good place with the transfer portal specifically. The NFL talent is just part of the process. It's part of the experience of being at Michigan. Is you're going to produce NFL talent, and when they're ready to go, they're going to leave. And you're just hoping that the guys behind those guys, are ready to step up. They also did a pretty good job of addressing some needs in the transfer portal. Losing two running backs meant that they were probably going to be inexperienced. So they go out and they bring in Justice Haynes. You lose those two defensive tackles like we mentioned. You have some talent coming back, but you get Trey Williams and Damon Payne to come in. The offensive line needs a couple of pieces. So you bring in a guy like Brady Norton who gives you some versatility. You also bring in plenty of talent on defense. In addition to Justice Haynes, you bring in guys that are more unproven at this level, but have productive pass in John Volker and CJ Hester. So they did a good job of bringing in talent. And this is just the top. They brought in more than just this list. Michigan knew that they had to fix some things, and they went out right away and wasted little time making sure that that happened. Now, one of the areas that they needed to improve on, like we mentioned, the quarterback position was abysmal. And I think Michigan fans just purely want to just move on from last year. The excitement that you got by signing Bryce Underwood was incredible. I can't imagine being a Michigan fan and seeing Sharon Moore being able to take Bryce Underwood away from LSU. Crazy. Now, the big question now is how soon before he starts? Now, Mikey Keene comes in from Fresno State as well. So you're bringing him from the transfer portal. He's familiar with Chip Lindsey's offense from his time at UCF. The Fresno State transfer can be very accurate. I think he's a mobile quarterback who can make some plays with his arm. He's very good on the run. Didn't participate in practices because of an injury. How much does that affect his game? Again, he's more familiar. He's just less talented than Bryce Underwood. So the biggest question is, how long before Bryce Underwood is going to step into that role and be the guy? I think that it's obviously a matter of when, not if. Bryce Underwood is going to be QB1 at some point this season, and Mikey Keene is kind of that bridge quarterback that is going to get him there. I think that you can only hold on to Bryce Underwood's abilities on the bench for so long before you have to unleash him. And he still might play even if Mikey Keene is the starting quarterback. I would be shocked if they don't utilize him even with Keene running the show. I think it's tough too because Mikey Keene is someone who could have gone to a lot of schools and started. And when he committed to Michigan, Bryce Underwood wasn't there. He was an LSU commit. Mikey Keene was going to be the guy. So Michigan fans already felt pretty good. And it's crazy how one thing can change their perception. You felt pretty good about Mikey Keene being your starting quarterback. As soon as you get Bryce Underwood, Mikey Keene is almost like not good enough in a way. But he is. And he's a good guy to have on your team for one final year. I was kind of surprised that he went to Michigan. It makes sense with Chip Lindsey, but Mikey Keene just doesn't seem like a guy who would transfer to Michigan. Not saying it doesn't fit, but you go from UCF after coming out of high school in Arizona, you go to Fresno State, back to the West Coast, and then go to the Midwest. It's just an interesting journey is really all that I'm trying to get at there. But over 2,800 yards last year, 18 touchdowns. If he rediscovers his confidence and he has good chemistry with the wide receivers, I think Mikey Keene could be a very successful quarterback for Michigan. And they could still utilize 2 QBs this year and be successful. I think that is more than possible in 2025. It's just that you're having this hyped up freshman quarterback that is destined to be successful, according to many. And you just have to, in this day and age, find a way to get him on the field. Now, Davis Warren is back. They're really hoping they don't have to go to him. Jaden Davis was interesting to watch in the spring as well. So we'll see how this quarterback position plays out. But one thing is for sure, it's going to be better than last year. There's plenty of potential. There's plenty of ability compared to last year. Last year was just really frustrating to watch if you're a Michigan fan and you're just glad that that season is over. And now you bring in talent that has potential, even with Mikey Keene. Bryce Underwood obviously has a higher ceiling, but he's inexperienced at the college level. So it'll be interesting to see how Keene and Underwood get utilized. We talked about Justice Haynes before, one of the better additions by this Michigan team, by this staff. That's going to be really fun to watch. This is a physical team that has really good offensive linemen coming back, and they're going to get back to what they did in the last couple of years, which is running the football, being physical, getting downhill. Behind him is where things are very interesting because you have Jordan Marshall comes back, ran the ball 31 times last year. You also bring in, like I said before, CJ Hester from UMass, John Volker from Princeton. Hester had 529 yards and 4 touchdowns last year with UMass. Volker, 514 yards and 6 touchdowns with Princeton. And this is a Michigan team that finished 73rd in rushing, which is not really an indication of what they're capable of doing. It's not indicative of the running backs themselves. I think that Mullins and Edwards were just dealing with higher expectations because the passing attack was non-existent. And when you finish 131st, that has to change. So that number for the rushing attack will improve as long as the quarterback position takes a step. And I think that it will. I think they'll be in a better place. It's just going to come down to the chemistry these quarterbacks have with these receivers. But some of that is also on the receivers. Yes, the quarterback position was not good, but at the same time, this was a group of wide receivers that I think underachieved as well. And we've been kind of waiting to see if this team could produce some elite wide receivers that produce at the college level. You've seen NFL talent, but can you produce at college? And the staff feels like they have a good group that could do that this year. And we'll look at the tight end position because that's still going to be a factor as well. Frederick Moore, Donovan McCulley, and Samaj Morgan are looking to take steps in this offense. Moore and Morgan come back. McCulley comes in from Indiana, and this is a guy who's trying to rediscover his 2023 form. When you look at what he did in 2023, 644 yards, 6 touchdowns. He has a great frame at 6'5", 200 pounds, so he has the ability to stretch a defense, makes big plays downfield when he's given the opportunity. That's going to help Moore and Morgan in terms of their opportunity as well. If they can't get it done, they feel good about the depth they have. Andrew Marsh is a freshman to keep an eye on. They think that he could be really fun. Anthony Simpson comes in from UMass, had a big year in 2023. Another guy that's looking to rediscover that form. 792 yards and 3 touchdowns. And you're probably thinking, well, he came from UMass. UMass used to be terrible, and they're still pretty bad. So if you have a successful year when teams know you're capable of doing things and you still produce, that says something. Now, going from that level to the Big Ten is a little bit of a transition. So TBD on that. Channing Goodwin's another name to keep an eye on. Kendrick Bell, Peyton O'Leary, Imarion Stewart. They have options. But again, we're waiting for somebody to step up and be that guy to be able to take this offense to another level. I think that they've been waiting for that for a little while, and they just haven't seen enough guys step up where they have a good unit. It's not enough just to have one guy. Colston Loveland did a lot of work last year at the tight end position because the wide receivers were lacking. They're hoping that this group as a collective unit is better and doesn't rely on one guy. The tight end position is going through a transition too. So Marlon Klein, Hogan Hansen are probably going to be the two guys that contribute the most at the tight end position. Zach Marshall could be in there. Brady Prescorn's an interesting option. The H-back, if you will. I just love how many different positions that Michigan has offensively. Max Bredesen is going to be a really interesting player. Maybe not from a production standpoint, but what he does as a blocker, how they utilize him. Very physical player. Behind him, Jalen Hoffman was really fun to watch last year as well. Played 13 games for this team. So this is going to be an offense that gives you different looks. And this is an offense that I think is trying to rediscover its identity. Running the football is going to be a big part of that. Throwing the football has to be better, though. In this day and age, if you want to win a national championship, for the most part, you have to have some sort of passing attack. And Michigan, obviously, when they won the national championship 2 years ago, they were able to run the football really effectively. However, they were still able to move the ball through the air. And last year is not going to get it done. This year has to be an improvement through the air. Plain and simple. Doesn't have to be an air raid by any means. It doesn't have to be one of the best passing attacks in college football. But you need to be efficient. And if you do have anything above that, that's just an added benefit to what will be a really exciting team. And then the rushing attack benefits from that as well. So again, you have options. They just have to produce and work together as a unit to be better. As it is pretty much a tradition with Michigan football, the offensive line feels like it's in good hands, even if you have a couple of new faces that'll step up. Evan Link's a really fun player at left tackle. You feel like he's got a bright future ahead of him at the next level. Giovanni El Hadi next to him. 43 games of experience, started all 13 games last year for the Wolverines. Greg Crippen is going to be another guy at center. Having him back is huge. I think having your center back for any team is going to be a good indicator of success for that next season. And he's a leader just as much as the quarterback is. And when you have two new guys in various different roles, where you have Mikey Keene as a new face but experienced, and then Bryce Underwood, who's a new face and inexperienced, having a veteran center is key. Nathan Ifobi could be one of the guards that we see. You also have a couple of guys behind him that are interesting. Brady Norton is one of the guys that we talked about earlier. Comes in from Cal Poly, had 11 starts last year, can play tackle or guard, so he gives them that versatility, gives them depth at multiple positions. Andrew Sprague could be the right tackle, but it could be someone like Brady Norton. Maybe a guy like Blake Frazier could be in the mix there. Luke Hamilton. Those are names to keep an eye on. I think that you're looking at a group, Andrew Babaloa is another guy as well. So you have some younger guys that could step up, but when you look at the recruiting that Michigan's done, you feel like they're in a good place offensively because of the offensive line. The offensive line is a big key to Michigan's success because of the offense they run. They need to be physical. They need to be able to run the football. And yes, the quarterback position is going to help that probably more so this year. than the offensive line, just because you have to be able to throw the football. It doesn't matter how physical you are if teams know what you're going to do. But the offensive line is in a good place, even with some inexperience on the right side of that. The left side and the center position feel like they're in good hands, but the right side of the line might need a little bit of time to gel and get used to things. And the schedule doesn't let them do that for very long. They need to figure that out, but that's what fall camp is for. And again, we'll dive into the schedule more later, but that's still a very intriguing group, a very exciting group that has a lot of potential with their veteran talent combined with the new faces. And if the offense needs some time, it feels like the defense can kind of hold the fort down for them while that happens. And up front, this is a group that has tremendous talent. Returning Derek Moore was, I think, a very underrated retainee by Michigan. TJ Guy is an underrated player. I think that's flying under the radar right now. That could have a big year. Both of them are extremely disruptive. 13 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks combined in 2024. And that's with Josiah Stewart playing a role. That's with Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant commanding a lot of attention. So now they have to take on potentially bigger roles and face more attention themselves because they don't have those guys eating up those roles. Trey Williams and Rayshawn Benny should be the starters at tackle. Trey Williams I'm surprised that he's still in college football, to be honest. I think that he is a veteran player who was pretty good at Clemson, and Clemson's defensive line was stacked super deep. I think he was looking for an opportunity to be a guy, so I'm excited to see what he can do in this role. Rayshawn Benny comes back after a solid year as well. And again, when you're working behind Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham, you're going to get in, but you're not going to get as much opportunity or many opportunities as those two guys. Behind those two guys, you have Damon Payne. Like I said, you brought him in from Alabama. We'll see what he can do in this defense. Another guy that was looking for more playing time. Trey Pierce and Enau Etta are two guys that could provide more depth as well. We'll see what they can do in their opportunities. TBD right now, but you feel that they have a good group up the middle. Behind Moore and Guy, Cameron Brandt's a really interesting player who was pretty productive last year. 13 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. You also have an interesting freshman in Caleb Redd that could be a contributor, could be a nice depth piece. You also maybe see a guy like Julius Hawley play that role as well. So we'll see what happens with the depth on the edge. But the guys that start, in addition to a couple of the rotation pieces, will get the job done for now. And we'll see how much they can elevate their ceiling. But up front, this is a group that, despite the NFL departures they sustained, they're in a good place. They're going to be able to be disruptive. And like I said, with the offense potentially needing some time to figure things out, this is where that group can really step in. And the linebackers are kind of the same. Jayshon Barham and Ernest Hausman are both back. That's a good tandem to have at the linebacker position. You also feel really good if you have to go to 3 linebacker sets, because Jimmy Rolder is a guy that's been really good this spring. The staff really likes what he can do, and they think that if they have to go with 3 linebackers, they are more than comfortable putting him in that situation. Cole Sullivan could be a guy that's a good rotational piece. Same with Jaden Hood. Troy Bowles comes in from Georgia. It's another guy that gives them depth behind those 3. The top 3 are solidified. It's just going to come down to who the guys behind them, if they need to go 3 linebacker sets more often. How they utilize someone like Derek Moore last year was really interesting to see how they used him in this defense. Maybe they can rotate him around and switch up the looks. And this is going to be a group that blitzes quite a bit. I mean, Wink Martindale is not shy about sending pressure. He is not afraid to send extra guys to get to the quarterback, to get to the ball carrier. And that's going to probably give some extra hits. So having this depth is vitally important for a group that might have to do a little bit more of the heavy lifting early on. But this defense is in a good place. They return good talent. Even though you lose 3 NFL type players up front, the linebackers and defensive line are in a good place because of who they have coming back. And That should feel really good if you're a Michigan fan. The secondary is going to go through obviously a little bit of turnover as well. When you lose a talented player like Will Johnson, you are going to take a step back at that position, plain and simple. To say otherwise would be a disservice, would be insulting to Will Johnson and what he was able to do. Even though you feel good about the guys you have coming back. Now, the one silver lining for Will Johnson's injury was the fact that some of these guys that will contributed more and were thrust into bigger roles in 2024. So Jair Hill and Zeke Berry got great opportunities because of Johnson's injury. They benefited from that. And Berry was an honorable mention All Big Ten selection. Now you get a chance to showcase that when there's not any concern about is somebody coming back. This is your job. You get it. Those are the two guys that get to step up and prove that they can continue to play at that level, continue to compete in the Big Ten. And you are going to face some really talented wide receivers. So that's really exciting for this defense. Rod Moore is back from injury. Didn't play the whole year. That was disappointing, but he comes back and is looking to get back on the field. That'll be really fun to watch. Brandon Hillman is going to be opposite of him, but also you have options behind those two guys as well. Jaden Mangum is back. Mason Curtis is back. So you have safety help behind those two guys, especially if Moore isn't back to 100%. We'll see what happens when week 1 rolls around, but you feel like you're in a good place. TJ Metcalf was a great addition from Arkansas. That was a really underrated addition from the transfer portal perspective of bringing in guys that maybe come from SEC talent, but I don't think a lot of people are talking about him. His brother Tevis Metcalf is also coming in. We'll see how they're utilized. They've been kind of put in multiple different positions from everything that I read, but we'll see where they get utilized the most. Those are two good pieces to have. Caleb Anderson's kind of the intriguing one from Louisiana. He's kind of the guy that is the wild card in this group. You also have at the corner position Shamari Earls, Josiah Edmond. So you're feeling like you have plenty of options. Once again, it's just how much depth you actually have. There's a lot of unproven talent behind the starters. I mean, Earls is a freshman, really good size at 6'2", 203 pounds. But after that, you feel like you have some unproven players that are looking to step up in a big way. And depth is going to be a big thing. In this day and age, winning a national championship, getting the college football playoff requires you to have depth. If you do not have depth, you're going to be in trouble. And Michigan has some depth, but I think they're looking to identify guys that can step up and give them more of that. And it's going to be a tough slate. When you're playing in the Big Ten, it's not going to be easy week in and week out. You are going to have to do quite a bit of work to win football games. But the schedule is where we're going to go to next. And I'm curious to see how this team shakes out in 2025. The first game against New Mexico would have been interesting had Bronco Mendenhall stayed at New Mexico, but obviously he is gone. So the new staff is probably going to have some work cut out for them. They're going to have to figure things out, but at the same time, you feel like Michigan is just going to take control of that game unless they're looking ahead to the next week. Oklahoma, a trip to Norman, Oklahoma is where they will head, and that's an Oklahoma team that is looking to bounce back as well. They have their own concerns that they need to fix, and this is a team that is facing quite a bit of pressure. I think that you're looking at an Oklahoma team that brings in John Mateer and expects the offense to be better. That's going to test this Michigan defense. Playing in Oklahoma is going to be tough for the quarterbacks too. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see what this group is capable of doing, and we'll see how that plays out. That's a big game early in the season. Central Michigan, the Sharon Moore suspension games come up next. So Central Michigan at Nebraska. I was kind of surprised that Nebraska was one of those choices, especially a road game. I don't know where else you would have picked them, but Nebraska, if they're better, that could be a dangerous team. But we say that year in and year out, and then Nebraska seems to always kind of let us down. So that's kind of a TBD team for the long run. But that's another tough test within the first month of college football, within the first month of their season. So that's a tough game as well. If Wisconsin isn't better, they might not have a head coach by October 4th. That could be a game that's relatively easy for Michigan if Wisconsin has moved on from Luke Fickell. USC could be better. That's another team that is tough to gauge right now because we're not entirely sure what Lincoln Riley's squad is going to be. Washington is a team that a lot of people think are slept on, and I think that they could be a surprise team in the Big Ten this year. Michigan State, it's a rivalry game, so anything can happen. They're supposed to be better. Purdue's probably still going to be terrible, but they have a new coaching staff, so you never know. But Michigan shouldn't have any problems with that. Then you get a bye week before you go on 2 road trips to Northwestern and Maryland. Those are 2 other teams that will be interesting to watch. Will they be better or will they be near the bottom of the conference? We will see. And then obviously the big one against the Ohio State Buckeyes, the game that Michigan honestly stunningly won last year. That was one of the more impressive feats that Michigan's had maybe in its entire history. With that team to beat Ohio State, the team that won the national championship, that's very impressive. So hat tip to Sherrone Moore and his staff for getting that done. When you look at the over-under right now, the over-under as I'm recording is set at 8.5. I think this team is capable of going 11-1. I think that the one loss I give them is just because you have to play Ohio State, at Michigan State, Washington, at USC, at Nebraska, at Oklahoma. Now, if everything's going right and the quarterback position has sorted itself out, this is still a team that's capable of being a double-digit win team. It's just I don't think they're going to go undefeated. Is that possible? I will hear arguments for it. I just don't see it with how many difficult games you have, especially the road games. Oklahoma, Nebraska, USC, Michigan State are all on the road. That's going to be tough to go 4-0. 7-5 is the floor. A lot of this hinges on the quarterback position. A lot of this hinges on the depth. Playing in the Big Ten is not easy, and that's going to affect the quarterback and your depth. If they're able to figure that out and they have those things sorted out, then they'll be just fine. Now, a lot of you are optimistic about the Michigan Wolverines. 31% say they'll finish 1st through 3rd. 56% say 4th through 8th. And 9% say 9th through 13th. 3% are in the 14th through 18th. I think that Sherrone Moore is gone if that happens. 4th through 8th is interesting because that tells me you're kind of in that middle tier of the Big Ten and things aren't going as well as you expected, and that over-under is probably hitting on the under. So that's what's really interesting for this team is that they have the ability to be really successful. They have the talent to improve on last year, but there's also a chance that maybe things are still needing some improvement. An 8-4 season is not a bad year, but I think Michigan fans would probably get a little annoyed with Sherrone Moore if that was the case. Still, this is a team that's really intriguing to watch. Everybody's going to pay attention to Bryce Underwood and what we should expect from him. And if he is playing by the end of the year, it's going to be really fun to see what the future of Michigan football looks like.